Greetings, people of the internet. Thank you, first of all, to our producer, Vince Rule of the Basement Creators Network, who is making this whole shindig possible. People of the internet. Thank you, first of all, to our producer, Vince Rule of the Basement. Okay, I'm back. Tiny glitch. Now everything is under control. All the relevant tabs are closed and we're back on course. So thank you to Vince Rule, whose last name is Rule because he rules. Who is producing this and making it go off either without a hitch or with maybe just a little tiny hitch due to user error on my part. But the hitches will be minimal thanks to his excellent work. And thank you for that slamtastic opening song, Vince. So welcome to all of you who are attending this slam, hopefully from across Nebraska, across the country, and around the world. I imagine that some of you are well familiar with the Science Slam format. Others of you, this may be the first time you've attended a Science Slam. Feel free to pipe it up in the chat and let us know whether you're a neophyte, whether this is your first slam experience, or whether you're a seasoned slam attendee, or even perhaps a past slammer yourself. I'm Jocelyn Bosley, and I work at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln as the Research Impact Coordinator, which means that I get to work mostly with faculty, but some with students as well, to help them really develop and implement and realize the societal impacts of their work. So that can look like a lot of different things, but there's a strong science communication component to it. So I've been involved in the UNL SciComm conference, affectionately known as No Coast SciComm, after our own Lincoln No Coast Derby girls. And because really good SciComm knows no boundaries, knows no coast. So that conference is something I've been involved in. And many of you are watching this stream, in fact, on the No Coast SciComm YouTube channel now. And so this event has a storied history, I would say. And so I want to just give you a little bit of background about slams in general, and specifically slams at the University of Nebraska and my role with them. So if you're attending and viewing the slam from somewhere other than the United States, particularly somewhere in Europe, you may go, oh yeah, science slams, they've been around for a while. And they have, since about 2006, I think, was when the first science slam was held in Germany. And the name science slam was intentionally not trademarked so that people could take it and host their own events under the name science slam. And it really became a movement. And that movement came to the United States via my former boss with the MRSEC is what we call it affectionately. It's the Materials Research Science and Engineering Center. So you see why we call it MRSEC at UNL. Axel Enders, who was a native of Germany and has since returned to the University of Bayreuth there. So he was familiar with the slam format, and he said, hey, we got to get this going on the University of Nebraska campus. And so in 2016, we hosted the first Science Slam in the US at the University of Nebraska. And since then, it has spawned a lot of sort of spin-off events, both at UNL and nationally. So we were really at the cusp of this innovation in science communication. And last year at the 2022 SciComm conference, we decided to try the first ever live streamed slam, live streamed on YouTube. And we involved Vince, and it all was incredibly rewarding to have people from different countries all come together and slam. Also people of all different ranks. So we had students, undergraduate students, graduate students, faculty members of all ranks, various disciplines. And that was very much in the spirit of what slams are meant to be, which is to communicate research across the boundaries of expertise and discipline. And I think that is why my co-host Georgina, who I'm going to refer to in just a minute and give her a chance to talk a little bit more, thought that this would be a great fit for the work that she's doing on infectious diseases. And so that's where we arrive at Science Slam 2023 Infectious Disease Edition. And she reached out to me about making this happen because I have, in addition to my role as Research Impact Coordinator, sort of become known as the authority on all matters slam since Axel Enders, who started the slam at the University of Nebraska and really the first slam of its kind in the US, has since gone back to Germany. I'm become the resident expert on campus at making these slams happen. And so I've been referred to as the Slam Sherpa, UNL Slam Sherpa for a while. But I started learning a little bit about that term and how it might be considered cultural appropriation. So I thought, okay, so maybe I'm not the Slam Sherpa. What am I? Should I be a Slam doula? Maybe I'm the Slam doula. But I thought, well, I do kind of, bring new life into events like this, kind of help someone like Georgina who wants to make it happen. So maybe Georgina's the mother here and I'm the doula, but did some research on that word, also potentially fraught. So here's where I landed. I decided that I will henceforth be known as UNL's Slam Wizard, or simply Slambledore. So you may call me Slambledore. Earlier today, I realized I don't have a wizard hat. I don't have any kind of, get up to signify my elite wizarding status here. But I was reminded of this picture. And before I tell you any more about my status as Slambledore and what we're going to do today, I have to tell you the story of this picture and preface it by saying this is part of a genre of photography that has been lost to the modern world, but will be familiar to those of you who are like, maybe Gen X and older millennials, known as there are just a couple exposures left on the roll and I need to use them up so I can go get the film developed. So these are some of my favorite pictures in the world, actually, are the ones that were like, oh, I'm just using up the roll so I can get it developed, because then I can go back and look and see, like, well, that weird duck, that wooden duck that we used to stick the mail in. Like, I would never have taken a picture of that on purpose, but here it is. So those using up the roll pictures are a gift that are lost to the ages now. We don't have those anymore. But this was one such picture. I think I was a senior in high school, and I was obviously making really good use of my time on like a Saturday or Sunday morning. I'm not sure what exactly precipitated taping cotton balls to my face, but suddenly I remembered this picture and I thought, Slambledore, that's my alter ego. This is a perfect picture of what I would look like if I was in fact a slam wizard. So as Slambledore, Georgina invited me to collaborate with her on this slam event. And now I want to, bring Georgina back into the frame and ask you a little bit about the specific project that got you thinking that you wanted to organize a slam, Georgina. So the slam is sponsored by the Nebraska Collaboration Initiative. So tell us a little bit introduce yourself, first of all, and then tell us what the Nebraska Collaboration Initiative is and how you got involved with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Jocelyn. And thank you for your, as usual, very vibrant and fun entrance into these amazing slams. So I'm Georgina Bingham. I'm a research associate professor in the Department of Entomology at UNL. And I have been lucky enough to follow several of Jocelyn's science slams. And I just think they are such an incredible way of getting the story of research and our science across in a very palatable way for everybody to be able to be involved in. So, everybody's going to get to be able to vote today. I'm very excited about that. And so it's a live stream. And so, any little mistakes we make, oh well. But yeah, so how did I get into this? So I have two other fantastic researchers that work with me on the project behind this slam. And to really dive into that, maybe I can tell you a little bit more about my background. Some of you might have kind of picked up a slight accent. You'd be right. I'm from England, a tiny, tiny rural village in England. And if you were to replace corn with wheat, we'd basically be in the same place magically. So yes, keeping that magic happening here. But yeah, so from there, I ended up doing an animal science degree in Scotland, studied abroad in Holland, and then did a PhD in London. But then I was offered a position with a Danish family company called Vestergaard. And kind of that's when everything changed for me. I got the opportunity to work in developing countries, particularly Africa and India, and then kind of saw all the issues and coming back to this aspect of infectious diseases. So how important infectious diseases are. And kind of that was the stirrings already of the idea of this project, in fact, all by myself. But then, so after 12 years working with that company, working on malaria, working on diarrheal disease with water filters, mosquito nets, you might have heard of Life Straw, Permanet. There are some of the bigger names of the water filters that you can even buy here in the outdoor stores. And then also looking at food security, protecting crops when they're stored from insects and toxic molds. But from there, through some great collaborations with USAID, USDA, and universities US universities such as UNL, I found myself here doing research and teaching. And so the research still continues that flavor of trying to help the most vulnerable in society, looking for ways to make access more equitable, for example, and that is exactly where this project comes to. So I met with Dr. Liz Van Wormer, also at UNL, and Dr. Y.L. Reyes at UNMC. And we kind of discussed together, and we felt like this infectious diseases and equitable access to funding, resources, was definitely an area we'd like to explore more, open the dialogue more, especially through this COVID-19 lens. So I won't go on too much more, Jocelyn, but
I think,
sorry, go on.
yeah, no, I think that, COVID-19 has really showcased for us the need to consider a viral infection or an infectious disease as about much more than the interaction between a pathogen and a host, right? So if we're going to fight COVID-19 or any infectious disease, we need to understand not just the spike protein structure of the virus, but these bigger structural systemic kinds of problems like equity and resource allocation. And also I know some of our slammers are going to be getting at the idea of how we communicate about this, how we apply technology in a way that is useful and meaningful and acceptable to people, and how we listen to their concerns. And so for that reason, I think it's totally appropriate that if we're talking about infectious diseases, that we, and just particularly through the lens of COVID-19, that we have an event like this where we specifically invite infectious disease researchers from any discipline. So I don't think we ended up with any historians, which is a little disappointing to me because my background is in the history of science. And so shout out to Greg Mittman at the University of Wisconsin, who's doing great, awesome work on the history of infectious diseases. But we have a lot to learn from historians, from sociologists, and psychologists, from a whole host of other kinds of expertise. In fact, one of our previous SLAM winners, I think it was the 2017 SLAM winner, Colleen Ray, was a sociology grad student at the time, and she's now working for the CDC as a behavioral scientist or a behavioral analyst. I can't remember what her title is exactly, but I think, even me having this background in the history of science, prior to COVID-19, if I had been told that there's this job like behavioral science specialist with the CDC, I probably would have gone, what does the CDC do with a behavioral science? Now abundantly clear why we need people of all of these backgrounds, including and especially the social sciences, as well as, of course, life sciences and ecology and entomology and all of these kinds of disciplines. So I'm so excited about the work that you're doing, Georgina, you and your team are doing, and that you brought me together. I also think, in addition to the sort of cross-disciplinary nature of the conversation around infectious diseases, another reason why it's so appropriate and germane that you wanted to host a science slam as part of this collaborative project, I was thinking about, what it is to me that makes a science slam so special. And you hinted at it a little bit, Georgina, which is the fact that something that differentiates it from other kinds of science communication competitions that some of you may have seen in the past or be familiar with, like a lightning talk competition, elevator pitch, these sorts of things, where the winner is typically decided by a panel of judges. The audience, you all are actually going to decide the winner today. You're all going to vote, and your vote is going to decide the winner. And so there's something beautiful about the fact that, I can tell you what I look for in a great science slam talk, but ultimately it doesn't really matter. You're the ones who have to decide what's compelling, what you expect a slam talk to be, what you hope to take away from it, and what you get out of it. And so it really, I think, holds researchers' feet to the fire in a sense. I think there are times that researchers approach science communication more as something like you have to send thank you notes, you have to eat your kale, you have to do these things for other people. But there's not necessarily that feedback loop, that close the feedback loop to tell you like, here's why you did what you did, here's what people got out of it or didn't get out of it. And so there's this immediate sort of feedback that you get from the audience in an event like a science slam where there's voting. But the other thing about the science slam, and you know how I roll, Georgina, we always like to keep it fun and keep it informal. And I think sort of my attitude towards science slams and really any event that I'm involved in, this is my philosophy, is that we take the work seriously, but ourselves not so much. And it occurred to me that that's actually a really useful, I think, and maybe the most useful or critical kind of piece of understanding how science works and when and why it works best, which is collaboration. So it's totally appropriate that the collaboration initiative is sponsoring us too, because, you know, in looking at how science works and the history of science and great scientific breakthroughs, often we think of, you know, the myth of the lone genius, right? I've got some companions here. We've got Newton, we've got Darwin and Marie Curie hanging out here. We've got Einstein. And so we think of these scientists who are, you know, finger puppetable, you know, and marketable in a sense. And we think of those lone geniuses, but even those really spectacular scientists that we know their names were great synthesizers, and they built on and used the work of others. And so I think, you know, as much as certainly there are egos in science, just like there are anywhere, in any field, but I think not taking ourselves too seriously and differentiating our own ambitions and selves from the work that we're doing is a critical tool for meaningful and effective collaborations and really scientific progress. And so if the slam is a tool to help scientists take themselves less seriously, I think that's actually critical for moving the scientific enterprise forward. So that's my philosophical perspective on why slams are a great thing for science in general, and especially for collaborative science. So let's get down to business, shall we? Time to so the slammers are all like, oh, when's she gonna shut up and let me do my thing? So a few just housekeeping items. In keeping with my role as Slambledore, you all won't see this during the slams themselves, but I couldn't resist sharing them with you ahead of time. I have 2 spells that I will be casting on the slammers. 5 minutes, which is two. We only have 1 image. They can slam, and they have 5 minutes. Other than that, so when they get to the 4-minute mark, and they have 1 minute left, I will be holding up the expecto mutum sign. So this tells them to expect to be muted in a minute if they don't give up. And then at the 5-minute mark, they're out of time. Then I will cast the expelliarm mic spell and give them about 5 to 10 seconds before I activate it. So I have my spells ready, and I think everybody looks like they're in position. Should we get to the main event? I think we should.
Yeah. I think it's time.
Okay, so the order of the slammers has been determined by random.org. So in accordance with the prophecy, the stochastic gods have decreed that our first slammer will be from UNMC, the University of Nebraska Medical Center, Sean Avedissian. So let's cue up Sean, and I will tell you when. Oh, that's right. Okay, thank you. So we're actually going to go through the little bug in my ear. We're actually going to introduce all the slammers here, and set the stage a little bit further by telling you what the theme is that they're addressing specifically. So we've got Sean from UNMC, as I told you. Then we'll have Lily Ripito from UNL. I'm not going to tell you too much about them because I know they're going to talk about themselves in the slam themselves. Then we'll have Joseph Faber, also from UNMC, and we'll wrap up with Crystal Uminski, who is actually participating in her 4th science slam. So she just can't stay away. She keeps coming back for more. And she was the winner of the SciComm Science Slam last year, in fact. So the competition will be stiff. Something we're excited about is that this is the first slam that it's been across UNL campuses. So we have participants from UNL and UNMC, folks from UNO, University of Nebraska Omaha, and Kearney were also invited to apply. And so I hope that that's something that we can continue in the future. One of the traditions that we have with Science Slams is to have a specific prompt that the researchers respond to. And that sort of helps them to both consider their work in a bigger, broader picture and think about the significance of their work beyond sort of the details of their research. And it also encourages them to sort of think about their science more as a story. Georgina used that word when she was talking about the science slams. They're really the story of science. The story of their science is what we hope to get at. So the question that we posed to the finalists in this slam are, what do you think is the most important lesson of the COVID-19 pandemic for infectious disease researchers, and how has this informed your work? So again, infectious disease researchers, broadly construed, it could be anybody whose work touches on infectious disease, and you will see when you get to hear the slams that they all touch on it in different ways. And so we want to hear what they think is the most important lesson of COVID-19 and how that's impacted the work that they're doing. Now are we ready to move into the first slam? Sorry, I got your hopes up before, Sean. I was ready to hear what you had to say, but I needed to set the stage a little bit more first. Okay, let's do this. Let's cue up Sean Avedisian of the University of Nebraska Med Center. Take it away, Sean. Your time is starting now.
Thank you, everybody, and thank you for having me. This is a great event. So I'm going to start off by just talking about some of the most important lessons that I think that I've learned, and maybe some of us can relate to it. One, vaccines are powerful tools. I think just thinking about how fast we were able to get a vaccine out for something like this was pretty incredible. Two, important of strong support systems, whether that be family and friends. There's been a lot of mental health issues being identified due to COVID and post-COVID, and I think it's important to have that. And some of the research that I'm going to talk about a little bit talks about mental health in a way, and some of the symptoms that we're seeing in patients. Three, and I think some of us can relate to this, maybe not, supply issues suck, whether that be toilet paper or just trying to get plastic for our lab supplies. It's been an issue because of the pandemic. Technology is important and whether that be Zoom. I always sign all my emails by saying, I think the greatest reason why human race will never reach its potential is due to meetings. And I think Zoom is actually now, because of the fact that we can just Zoom into meetings, we can have meetings back to back, whether that be a good thing or a bad thing. I think technology has kind of really showed us what we can and can't do, whether that even be on a more positive sense, like telehealth. There's been a lot of initiatives to kind of get telehealth going in hospitals and in clinics. And also, something that maybe wasn't relatable before, but before, this word hybrid remote work was something that was, a far fetch, but now it's kind of an expectation in some places. And five, I think this is a really important one, and talks a little bit about my research, is we need to adapt. We were not prepared for the first pandemic. This will not be the last, and hopefully we've learned a lot from this, and we can take that to the next one that will eventually come. And finally, viruses suck. There's a famous quote by this microbiologist that says, the single biggest threat to man's continued dominance on this planet is the virus. So kind of jumping into what I've learned and how it's affected my work, you can call me a viral pharmacologist. A lot of my work previously has been in HIV pharmacology, specifically in the central nervous system and how antiviral agents can enter the CNS to potentially inhibit viral reservoirs and viral replication. So with COVID, I've had to adapt and then also look at the same type of things that we're seeing in HIV in COVID. So specifically CNS infections of COVID. Does COVID infect the brain? Does it have viral reservoirs like it does in HIV? And do these antiviral agents that treat COVID, do they enter the central nervous system to treat COVID? There's this term that's been thrown around. It's called long COVID, and that's something that's kind of a bigger thing now. I think it's safe to say that acute COVID 2 years ago has kind of moved into more of this long-term COVID infection thing. Two main theories on how COVID gets into the brain is one through the nose and two through the blood-brain barrier, so through the blood. So I think speaking a little bit about long COVID, about 10% of patients that get infected with COVID are experiencing these long COVID symptoms. And that's specifically having COVID symptoms after COVID infection for greater than equal to 3 months. So a lot of these patients with long COVID are experiencing things called, brain fog. Some of the other symptoms of long COVID would be brain stroke due to lack of oxygen, brain inflammation, cognitive impairment, loss of taste or smell, which was actually something that was seen back when COVID was first a thing. And some of that can go to sleep deprivation, anxiety, loss of memory or focus, or depression and headache. So a lot of my focus then has been looking at, okay, does COVID infect the brain? Well, we've actually found that with using cells with those plastic issues, we were finally able to get lab supplies. It took a while, almost a year, but we were able to get those plates. And we found that COVID actually does infect brain cells. And we found that, first we asked, does the ACE2 receptor, the receptor that COVID uses to get into the brain, are they expressed on the brain cells? And we found that they were. So then we asked, does it actually infect the cells? And we found that they did. So that's kind of where my research has gone in terms of COVID and how it's affected me. I've had to kind of, go from HIV and have these side projects now looking at the same things that I was looking at in HIV into COVID. So some of the questions that we want to ask is, how does this correlate to animal models? So we have some ongoing work looking at long COVID and specifically CNS COVID in animal models. And then ultimately want to correlate that to clinical data. UNMC is one of the sites for the RECOVER trials. So that's the ones looking at long COVID in patients. So hopefully we can kind of connect all these dots together and see if some of our preclinical stuff correlates well to our clinical stuff. And at that, I'd like to say thank you.
Nice. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Great
Thank
job.
you so much, Sean. Yeah, I am fascinated and very, very glad that you are working on long COVID and whatever it is or whatever complex of things it turns out to be. It almost reminds me of like the shift in thinking about cancer treatment and how, there was a time when people were looking for the cure for cancer, like it was one thing, and then it's actually a whole bunch of different things. And long COVID is still the scariest thing for me, I think. Being vaccinated, I feel pretty good about my chances of not developing a serious illness, but there's just so little known about the long COVID. So I'm so glad that you're on the case, Sean.
That's awesome, Sean. I really liked how you brought up supplies and supply issues, the toilet paper issue. I have my own personal experience. I was single during COVID, and so online dating, and I found my husband during COVID. So, all kinds of things can happen during these, and that also links into mental health, of course. But yeah, I like that you brought those in.
Well, nice that there were some unanticipated positive consequences, perhaps, of the pandemic too. Your online dating adventures. That's good to hear, Georgina. Okay, well, next up we have Lily Ripito, who is an undergraduate researcher in the Helicar lab at the biochemistry department at UNL, and we're excited to hear about her work and how it reflects on COVID-19 and how COVID-19 has informed her work. So take it away, Lily. Once we transition to you, I will tell you when your time starts, and that is now.
Thanks, Jocelyn. So right now, you're all watching my talk through a technological device, maybe from your home. One thing I think many people realized during the COVID-19 quarantine was how we can use technology to best serve our individual needs. For example, I used Zoom for my education, while my family used it to virtually celebrate birthdays, and Georgina used it for online dating. Same technology applied differently for the best interest of whoever was using it, depending on their specific circumstance. So what if we extended that concept to healthcare and created healthcare technology that, with the same base infrastructure, could be personalized to an individual patient to best support their needs? This idea we call a digital twin, a computer replica of one individual person. It's programmed with all of the constraints, mechanisms, and regulations that biological research has to offer, and then parameterized with the individual patient's health data that is already widely collected from tests done at the doctor's office. So I imagine you saying, great, but how? In our research at the Digital Twin Innovation Hub, we're starting with the immune system and integrating models from the subcellular to the physiological scales. For this highly techie part, we're following a multi-scale, multi-approach blueprint we developed for modeling CD4 plus T cells. We model each immune cell type as an individual agent regulated by two factors. The first, intracellular logical models of signal transduction, and the second, constraint-based models of genome-wide metabolism. So those intracellular logical models are then themselves informed by ordinary differential equations describing extracellular cytokine concentrations. And then each agent in the overall model migrates between compartments, such as the circulatory system, lymph nodes, and lungs. So by using many types of computer modeling and allowing each type to inform the others, we are creating a model able to reflect the complexity of the immune system. Overall, immune system digital twins will be used for diagnosis, prognosis, and therapy optimization for individual patients, as well as drug discovery. That's a lot of goals. So we have a lot of parts of the Digital Twin Innovation Hub. There's that computational modeling side, which right now is at the stage of building the logical models and metabolism models. Part of the metabolism section that we're working on is identifying drug targets and potentially repurposable drugs for metabolism impacting diseases. So hitting two goals in one, general infrastructure and drug discovery. We can dive in a bit more and look at our 4 steps to computational drug discovery. The first is to collect and analyze data. We're getting together what we know about particular genes and gene expression from the literature. The second is to create tissue-specific or cell type-specific models. We do this by combining general open source tissue and cell models with the information from the last step to specify the general models. The third is to identify disease-related genes by analyzing transcriptomic data of patients. And the fourth is the identification of drug targets and repurposable drugs, which broadly involves performing simulations using the models and information from the past 3 steps to get these aims. All right, zoom back out. Another side of the hub is the wet lab, which we need in order to validate the biological mechanisms being programmed into the digital twin infrastructure to make sure it is accurate to what's happening in real life. And finally, I'll talk about another very important side of the hub. Something we saw during the COVID-19 pandemic that really hindered the healthcare community's efforts was a lack of knowledge about the scientific process and general scientific literacy. A lot of treatment hesitancy or even disbelief made really incredible treatments completely ineffective because people refused them. Because healthcare is so personal, and with the whole intent of human digital twins being to better serve the complex individuality of patients, as well as develop new drug treatments, we also need to focus on engaging the community throughout the creation of health technology. The Hub is continuing to build and develop our technology Cell Collective, which is a biological modeling software that has many uses. It's the backbone upon which we're developing all this more complicated digital twin simulation and prediction technology. It also has a side for teachers and students, which provides biology lessons through interactive simulations. The goal of this are to increase student retention of biological concepts, as well as familiarize them with computational modeling, as it is on track to become extremely common in the future. We want future healthcare providers to understand how to use this emerging technology to best serve their patients, as well as having more citizens comfortable with technology being an active participant in their healthcare decisions. I will leave it there. Thank you.
Yeah, Lily!
Great job, Lily.
Thank you for ending when you did. I was like, please don't make me mute her. I don't want to have to mute her. I'm all big and talk and bluster and everything ahead of time. Like, I will mute you if you go over 5 minutes. But then once we're into it, I'm like, I don't want to mute her. I want to hear all about this. So fascinating. I have a hunch, Lily, that you will get some questions from your fellow slammers later in whatever sort of Q&A discussion time we have at the end, because I was watching Joseph's face in particular as you were introducing the digital innovation twin hub, and he was like, he was fascinated. So I have a feeling everyone's going to want to follow you and see how you live and learn more about the work that you're doing. But I love the point that you can have all this individualized care and treatment, and if it's individualized only to someone's physiology and not to who they are as a person, and you haven't taken into account what kinds of technology or interventions they are likely to or equipped by scientists to understand and appreciate and accept, then it's no good. So all those layers, so important and difficult and complex to consider simultaneously, but I love it.
Yeah, I love the way you kind of zoomed in and then zoomed out, taking a look at the bigger picture and then all the way into the personal level, because of course, this has affected each of us individually, affected our families, our communities, and then all the way up to the global community. And so this is exactly kind of the concept that we were looking to highlight with this project. So yeah, that's really interesting. And then you talked a little bit about science communication and getting the information out there. And I think we can all agree that COVID-19 and the aftermath the devastating aftermath has definitely changed the world and also the way we view and consume science. So.
And also the idea that somehow data speak for themselves, which they never did. But I think we know that now more than we used to, that you can't just put the data out there and say, look, it works. There's more to it than that. And it's more difficult, but also more important and just really crucial to the success of the whole scientific enterprise. So fantastic job, Lily. Our next slammer is Joseph Faber, who is also hailing from the University of Nebraska Medical Center. Epidemiology department, and so excited to hear his take in a talk that is sure to be a slam dunk. Starting now.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much for the invite. I'm excited to talk to you all and trying to answer this question, what's the single most important lesson learned? Seems like a lot, but I really do want to come at this from my own perspective and the work that I was, so fortunate to be able to conduct kind of at the beginning of the pandemic as it was really, really raging. And it really, I think fits in well to the spirit of the Science Slam tonight, which is all about collaboration. So I'm going to talk about a very unique and strange and wonderful and productive collaboration that we started really early on in the pandemic. And that was our work with the National Basketball Association, or the NBA. I'm a sports fan myself, and often when I think of the NBA, I don't think of infectious disease unless I'm thinking about like the Jordan flu game or something. But the story starts off when I was a postdoc at the Yale School of Public Health in the epidemiology of microbial diseases department, where we were actually doing the genomic epidemiology of RNA viruses prior to SARS-CoV-2. And then when we heard wind of an emerging coronavirus, we were able to switch our gear relatively quickly because we were doing a lot of that same work already. And one part that came out in this really early on in the pandemic was the inaccessibility of diagnostics, and getting a diagnostic test was incredibly difficult to do. It was painful, obviously, with nasopharyngeal swabs. Nobody wants those. And there was some research scientists at the Yale School of Public Health that noticed that saliva very early on was a really useful substrate for testing whether or not someone had SARS-CoV-2 RNA and therefore had a case of COVID-19. And then sometime in the summer of 2020, I do not know how this initially kicked off. The NBA reached out to us, or we reached out to the NBA, but we had developed this saliva direct diagnostic test, which I have an image of there, where you can do a COVID test using just saliva. And we needed a partner. In order to get FDA emergency use authorization, you need really large sample sizes. And this was right around the time the NBA was starting to play basketball again. If you remember, they were the first sports league to come back. They rented out Disneyland in Orlando and put together the so-called bubble. Because they were testing individuals every day using the current the gold standard diagnostic test of a nasopharyngeal swab. They also provided saliva samples alongside it, so we could test both to come up with the sensitivity and specificity and positive predictive value, negative predictive value, all these things that are important for diagnostic tests. But they really chose to come out and say, if we're going to do this and take resources, we want to make the best impact that we possibly could. So they helped us get an emergency use authorization for a saliva test that was actually being run at both UNMC and UNL when there was COVID testing going on. And then once they helped us get this sample size with that, they reached back out and they said, we're doing this thing in Orlando in the bubble, and if someone does get COVID-19, could we send you all the sample and could you tell us where it might have come from? And we thought, well, maybe. No one's really done that before, but we would absolutely try to give it a go. And that kicked off a collaboration that just ended last month after 3 years of work with the NBA and helping with their occupational health and safety programs. It was an incredibly robust program, starting in the NBA bubble, where actually no one affiliated with the NBA got COVID during that time, which was remarkably impressive and a testament to the extensive program the NBA was doing at the time. But what this allowed us to do as researchers, not just at Yale, but we had collaborators, at all sorts of institutions across the country, to answer some really important questions about SARS-CoV-2 infections that we just couldn't have answered otherwise. So we've been able to publish a number of what I think were important research studies. For example, what I'm showing in kind of the bottom right-hand corner there is we're able to actually track the course of an individual SARS-CoV-2 infection because they were testing people every day. You were able to actually say, this person tested positive for the first time today. What's the viral trajectory look like in their system? How long are they actually going to test positive for? How much virus are they going to have in their system? And then importantly, when things like variants of concern came out, we could ask, do those values change when we're dealing with the Alpha variant or the Delta variant or Omicron? Is the reason why Omicron is so much more transmissible because you have higher viral loads, or is it more immune evasive? And then importantly, it also provided us with data where we could, kind of ask critical questions of policies. For example, kind of famously, when the CDC came out and said 5 days after a positive test, you're good to go, we were able to look back at all of our data and say that, well, actually over half the people in our cohort that tested positive were still positive 5 days later. So again, I think this was a really unique collaboration, a really incredible collaboration with a group that was doing work that they didn't need to make the data publicly available, and they did, and they've worked with us every step of the way. So yeah, thank you all for listening to the story.
Fantastic, Joseph. So I'm curious. I can't wait till the Q&A to ask this question. Did you interact with like NBA officials yourself? Just because we were talking with Lily about the role of science communication in all of this, like to what extent did you yourself need to kind of, explain the research that you were doing or make recommendations about protocols to non-scientists who are responsible for making these policy decisions?
We did a ton of that, which is kind of in the spirit of what we're talking about. But interestingly enough, I met Adam Silver, who's currently running the NBA draft as this is going on, to explain to them kind of the intricacies of whole genome sequencing and genomic epidemiology and what the data can tell us, what it can't tell us. They had incredible partners. A gentleman by the name of Dave Weiss, who's VP of the NBLPA, can tell you more about how to do this sort of work than 99% of scientists. So they were invested, they were engaged, and there was a lot of communication between all the different teams and the different parties involved in building these programs.
Fantastic experience. So yeah, if you're not from Nebraska and you weren't aware before, UNMC is kind of a big deal, and Joseph's obviously at the front lines of that work. So we're so glad that he is. Georgina, what do you think? Should we introduce our last slammer?
Yeah, I think so. I think I'm ready for the song session of the evening.
So Crystal, who's here to defend her title, she's the defending champion, is known for her science parody musical stylings. And so if you know me, I'm a huge fan of Tim Blay of Acapella Science. Tim, call me. But Crystal is definitely giving him a run for his money. So she has let's see, some of her previous gems included the slam winning Super Teach parody of Rick James Super Freak last time. And you did, you can test this. You with a U in the tradition of MC Hammer can test this. And now I don't know what song we're gonna get this time. I only know that we're going to get a song. So I've been following Crystal on social media and I know that a song is coming. So I can't wait any longer. Let's bring Crystal into the fold. And Crystal, your time is starting now.
Hi, thank you. I'm really excited to be here. As of last week, I'm the newest PhD out of UNL's School of Biological Sciences. And I'm going to be talking about my work with COVID testing. But unlike some of the previous types of COVID testing you've heard, like the nose swabs and whatnot, I've done a little bit of a different type of COVID testing. My work has looked at the types of tests that we are doing in introductory biology courses. So what are we actually testing students on in biology? What types of content? What are we doing in terms of like the skills? Are we asking them to do the modeling and the data analysis that kind of like what Lily had talked about? Or are we doing just mostly memorized facts? And my graduate school experience largely spanned during COVID. But that provided a nice natural experiment to look at the testing that we were doing in introductory courses during that COVID period compared to the previous non-COVID times. So I looked at over 4,000 test questions, over 100 different universities participated. And what I found was that there was not statistically much different. And I think that is actually a really powerful result. If you think about what happened in COVID, there was like that transition point where we were doing stuff online or in class in person, and then all of a sudden it was online. We were in that weird hybrid zone, sometimes doing things in person, mostly online, and nobody was really prepared how to do that. It just happened really fast, and then it just stuck that way for a while. And the fact that we don't see really any differences between what we were doing and testing, I think is a really important result. People didn't just resort to using the tests at the back of the textbook, which are notoriously not good. People were really putting in effort. I had about half of people who had tested during COVID told me that they were making a conscious effort to make their questions more open book, to make their testing more open book. And about a third of those instructors told me, I want my questions to be less Googleable. And I think both of these things, the open book, the less Googleable, are moving science education is in the right direction. These types of non-Googleable questions are getting students to think in those really broad critical thinking skills that we want students to be able to develop. So if I had to pick an important lesson out of COVID, I think it's that we're resilient, both biology instructors and as humans as a whole. We really approach these challenges and tackle them head on. So to celebrate and to really embrace these null results that are, I think, really exciting. I do have a song. I'm no David Byrne, but I'm going to try my best here a cappella, just to avoid some copyright. I'm going to do it on my own here. So this is COVID testing in the style of Talking Heads. I'm a slammer and here are the facts. I study assessments and I study tests. During COVID, all online. Don't worry, it all turned out fine. COVID testing, what's the data say? Different. No, 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 no way. Oh, COVID testing, what's the data say? Different. No, 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 no way. Now I started a slam song. Now I had better finish it. We tested a lot. Doesn't mean anything. Well, I've got something to say. The data is real. We tested it once. We can test it again. COVID testing. What's the data say? Different. No, 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 no way. Oh, COVID testing. What's the data say? Different. No, 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 no way. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Oh my gosh, Chantel!
Getting those high notes. Oh my
I
God.
know. Yes, the high notes. Impressive. Oh my gosh.
Done.
Fantastic. So I'm so glad that I didn't know what song you were going to parody, because the surprise was a lot. It was so much fun. Chris was teasing us online with like, if you know your album covers, then you might know. And I was like, I do not know my album covers apparently, because I don't know what that's in reference to. But you did indeed bring the big suit energy. I don't think your shoulder pads are quite big enough to truly be in the Talking Heads League, but your vocal chops are. So that was fantastic. And I love the different spin on COVID testing and what that can mean. Also, I mean, like, we've seen so many headlines about how students are doing and the test results. And so to think about how teachers were developing their tests, developing testing questions, and the idea that maybe this has pushed them a little bit to do something a little different is fascinating. As you may see on your screen right now, the votes are currently open. So wherever you are watching this, you can either click on the link, or there's a QR code and you can go to this page and vote. we'll give you a couple minutes to do it, and then we'll give you a countdown when we're getting close. You can also feel free, if you've already voted, you can also feel free to put questions in the chat wherever you're watching this. We'll see your questions. And so feel free to comment with a question, or just, crazy emojis or applause signs, whatever you want to put in the chat. But particularly if there are questions that you want to ask any of the slammers, we can discuss those after the voting concludes. So shout out to Kim Hansen, who's been very active in the chat. Nicely done, Kim. Glad to see you're giving your encouragement to the slammers there. Now is the tough part, though. It's easy to encourage all the slammers, but now you have to pick one to vote for. Oof.
That's not easy. That's not easy.
Tough decision. Yes, yes, yes.
Everyone was very different this time. It's very, very cool. Yeah, I really love how all your slams have kind of covered various different aspects of the issues, from like mental health to being able to get hold of toilet paper, to being online for teaching, and all the different things. Like Lily was talking about how their program is just kind of pulling it all together in that digital twin. But yeah, it's just been really great listening to you all. Thank you so much for sharing all of this. And I think it's definitely in the interests of the collaborative initiative, bringing us all together and talking and sharing stories.
It gives me a lot of hope, I will say. It gives me a lot of hope that great and creative and enthusiastic minds are on the case. And thinking about this and collaborating and talking amongst themselves and working together on this. Wow, it is really close, isn't it? The race between, so Sean was joking, has been joking all along, like his only goal was to finish top 4, which of course he already did, but so he's already achieved his goal, but he's coming for you, Crystal. I don't know. The bars are still changing a little bit by little bit. So, I say we give you another 30 seconds to vote. So if you haven't already voted, then make sure that you do so in the next 30 seconds. And then I'll count down when we get to 10 seconds left. Oh. Anticipation. Those are stabilizing a little bit. Crystal might hang on to it. We don't know. Sean's coming for her.
I think I saw a couple of people saying, "Where is the link?"
Oh, okay. So that's a great point. The link should. Yeah, so the URL is on the screen. Otherwise, you should see it in the, oh, Mike's got it. Okay. Otherwise, you should see it in the event description on YouTube. And there's also the QR code that you can scan if you want to. Okay, so let's count it down. I'll start at 15, just to give you an extra 5. 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It's Crystal! Crystal repeats as the slam champion in, yes, a fierce competition, as Kiyomi said. The competition was fierce. Congratulations, Crystal. I don't know, like, which was more exciting, getting your PhD or being crowned slam champion for a second time? Don't answer that. I'm pretty sure getting your PhD was more exciting, but I know you got a cake when you defended your dissertation successfully, but here you got digital confetti. So, I mean, come on. Pretty cool stuff. I'm going to open the floor now to any of you all if you have questions for each other or comments for each other. And then I'll also be checking out the chat and see if any of us if there are questions for anyone there. Mike Herman says it was a really good cake. So he is the director of the School of Biological Sciences at UNL, and therefore it was around. And I think it's his prerogative to partake in all the graduation cakes and all the doctorate completion cakes, I imagine. It's a major perk of being in that role. Any slammers have any ideas for how you could collaborate with one another now that you've heard each other's talks? Anything you want to know more about from each other? You're all just so relieved to be done with the slam.
I can jump in and I have a question for Lily. Do you know how the Cell Collective lessons and things that are geared towards education, do you know how those are designed? Like, how do you get involved with doing something like that?
Awesome. Yeah. So Cell Collective is split into three parts. So there is the learn, teach, and research sections. So research section is primarily for university researchers. It has like a large model database. And then the learn and teach sections are made for students and teachers. So there is like a K-12 portion, and then there's a undergraduate portion. And the lessons are designed. We have some people on our team who are actively designing lessons, particular for they design separately for the undergraduate and the K-12 lessons. And then they are just based on a certain topic. So like we have a CD4 plus T cell differentiation, or there's just ones on like DNA, and there's a couple that introduce, you know, how do you add components? How do you draw the modeling lines? So they're generally set up with a background, which is a little bit of information about the lesson. And then you go into having some like prompts that'll teach you sort of how to build a model, and then you get to play around with the model, see how the biological system works. And there's some follow-up questions to just like ensure that there's actually retention and learning happening while they play around. Yeah, and if you want to interested, we would love to give you more information. I know on the Broader Impacts Partner database that Jocelyn manages, we're on there. If you search Cell Collective or email us, contact me. Yeah, there's tons of great stuff.
And all the Twitters, right, Lily? So you can find the Cell Collective on Twitter. You can find the Digital Twin Innovation Hub on Twitter, and you can find Lily herself on Twitter. So,
this is
and
true.
the Helicar Lab and Tomas Helicar. So yes, they are twittering all the things. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I could definitely see a potential collaboration between you guys. What is next for you, Crystal?
I will be moving to New York. I've got a postdoc position at Rochester Institute of Technology. So I'll be staying in the education research realm, looking at like different visual representations of DNA and how do students interpret like the really abstract ones compared to more realistic pictures of DNA. So I'm excited for it.
Fascinating. So I was thinking about, again, philosophizing about, the nature of the scientific process and collaboration. And I always, like to think of science as sort of like a murmuration of starlings, which is fun to say anyway, a murmuration of starlings. But also I think it's an apt metaphor because, the individual pieces, these folks may be doing something that where it's one small part of it. Maybe they're not even aware of the full scale of the implications. And so each scientist is doing the work that they're doing, but then together it's more than the sum of its parts. And that's really what drives scientific progress, is not the work of an individual scientist or an individual starling, but the emergent properties that happen and that come out of the group and of the interactions. But I was thinking that better still, perhaps, and this pertains to kind of what Crystal was saying and the Cell Collective in general, a better analogy for those of you in the biology and biology adjacent realms would be like a protein, right? Because the scientists could be the amino acids, but the sequence of amino acids, the particular amino acids is one thing, and then the sequence of them is another thing. But then it's really the way that the secondary structure and the tertiary and the quaternary and how they all interact with each other, and then the shape that they form and how that then enables them to interact with their environment. So that's the communication piece. So I have to think this through a little bit more, but I'm thinking that a protein is a pretty good analogy for the scientific process and the role that individual scientists play in it. Well, thank you all so much. We're at 8:00. Georgina, you have any final comments you want to make?
I think this has been amazing. I want to thank everybody. We were interested in kind of trying to bring people together to see what we can do better and learn from the different experiences we've had with COVID research to help our global community. And I think we've heard a lot of really, really cool research that's happening here. I hope the folks at home followed along and enjoyed this too. But yeah, definitely in the spirit of sharing information and bringing people together. I think this was such a great event. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.